Welcome to the NABS podcast. NABS is the support organisation for those working in advertising, marketing and media. I'm your host, Louise Scodie. Each week I'll be chatting with someone from our industry to find out how they support themselves and those around them through challenging times as well as the day-to-day. And it's all to help you support your own mental wellness. I can't wait to start chatting. This week our guest is Ally Owen. Ally Owen founded Brixton Finishing School. This award-winning accelerator finds, trains and places underrepresented talent in roles. Recognising the impact that COVID-19 had on young people's futures, Ally also launched the game-changing Academy programme, which gives more than 2,500 students a year across the UK a fairer chance to succeed. 2021 also saw the launch of Adventure, which aims to introduce our industry to thousands of diverse 14 to 18-year-olds, as well as Visible Start for women over 45. Ally has a host of accolades, including Changemaker 2023, Me for Diversity Awards, and Beamer 2020 Champion for Change, and others too numerous to mention. Welcome, Ally, to the NABS podcast. How are you today?
Do you know what? I'm good today. Okay, fair to middling, which is quite a British thing to say.
Yeah, it is. Hopefully that's classic British understatement where you're actually doing fantastically well, but you're just saying, yeah, fine, whatevs. Your accolades, what we are laughing about the fact that there's loads of them, but you have done so much to widen representation in our industry and your work just carries on and on. It's so impressive. How do you find the time and the energy to do this much?
Oh, I wish there was. I think I'm probably not normal.
Right.
In a lot of ways. We'll get on to how not normal I am. So the time, I'm very passionate about what I do, and what I do doesn't feel like work. It feels like a natural extension of myself. So it's just kind of like a constant unfolding of stuff that just needs to happen. I kind of can see, I've got a vision in my head for a much more equitable industry where there's accessible pathways for all. And obviously then that talent also gets to the top as well. It's not enough to get people in. And then every action I do kind of falls out of that. I would say on the time thing, I have experienced burnout. I have had counselling on workaholicism.
Oh, wow.
So I would say that is work in progress on better, not overdoing it, which sounds counterintuitive when there's so much to be done.
What does that workaholism look like for you?
Oh, it's such a weird word, isn't it? For me, I used to work 7 days a week. But that was partly because when I set Brixton up, it was just me. And it was a very successful strategy in the first year or so to keep us going. Because actually the one variable that I could afford was me. Obviously, however, it becomes quite a safe place if you're always striving at work, because it's worked when the business was smaller. And I think when obviously our impact scaled up and the team scaled up, I was slow to flex my strategy because I was clinging to safety. I was highly anxious. I founded the company on some remortgages and a credit card. So it's not as if we were cash rich at any point. And actually, like a lot of founders, I went on that journey where probably long after I could have stopped doing as much, my fear of failure slowed me down from changing my strategy. So but now, pleased to know, listeners, I'm down to a reasonable working week. But that took about 2 years.
Definitely a work in progress. Why does my idea of your reasonable working week still look like quite a lot?
Well, as I sort of say, it's a work in progress, but I've got so much better. I don't have as much anxiety around not working as I used to, which is really counterintuitive. But I think, a lot of people, especially maybe founders or people that are launching new things or really passionate about their job can probably understand that sentiment. Even
definitely.
It can be, quite damaging to your health.
Well, speaking about mental wellness challenges, can you tell us about a mental wellness challenge that you faced outside of that? And that's particularly in your identity as someone living with neurodiversity.
Yeah. So I am ADHD. I'm probably autistic as well, but to do that test, it's another 600 quid, and I haven't got that kind of money.
Right.
But I have been diagnosed as ADHD, which I think at my age, so big reveal listeners who can't see our beautiful faces, I'm a woman in my early 50s. So
Shock horror.
Shock horror. They exist within industry. Oh my God. So definitely I'd managed my unknown neurodiversity, though I did feel I was different, quite successfully, i.e., probably not that successfully in other people's eyes. I got through it when I was younger, but certainly from the age of 45, around the time I launched Brixton, and recently in the last couple of years, the crossover between the impact of menopause and having ADHD is actually, when you do a Venn diagram, when those two things cross over, it's just a chasm of pain in the middle, because the estrogen that has been propping up your ability to manage your ADHD is obviously compromised. So if I put it, so it becomes like an Olympic sport, an endurance sport life for a couple of years. Luckily, I've got support and I got a diagnosis, and obviously I've become a lot better at advocating for myself within the NHS. So I have got a series of treatments at the moment which are helping hold me together.
That's a real double whammy of having to advocate for yourself, because the path to getting support with menopause in the NHS, sadly, is not straightforward for a lot of women. And it's very, very difficult to get an ADHD diagnosis on the NHS because so many people are going for it and that area is under-resourced.
So with the ADHD, if I start on the ADHD, I was on the list for 3 years and it was having a really big impact on my life. Constant waves of burnout. I went from somebody who could cope with noisy rooms with lots of noise to somebody who was literally just raw, if that makes sense. Apparently, if you're neurodiverse, especially if you've got ASD, you take in about 4,000, no, I think it's like 40,000 more things a day, just in your awareness. You're kind of overloading the input streams to your brain. So I was having to have, a lot of, let me just go and sit in a quiet, dark room while I recover from that exchange or that event. Even now, if I go to a conference, I know I need an at-home on my own day the next day. In terms of the menopause, again, I say this is what I've got, but the journey to me discovering that took years. It's great we've got to the end of it, but I wish I'd known, say, a couple of years ago, that all these interacting symptoms and experiences were actually not me sort of losing my ability to function. There was actually a kind of medical and the way I'm made reason for it. And it was perfectly treatable and manageable, giving the right support. Yeah.
Do you look back on your time in your earlier career and think, if only I had had the diagnosis then and had whatever treatments you're having now, that your path would have been different, maybe better?
I think I would have had a lot less stress. I was, so background wise, I'm going to say at the time I was non-traditional. So I am a socially mobile woman. I was a single parent. That is quite unusual at that point within a lot of the areas of industry. And definitely now, what I now understand to be, ADHD and potentially ASD meant I had a very different understanding of the world and interactions, and also just how things worked. And, coming from a socially mobile background into the industry, you've got to learn this one language about how offices operate. It took me ages to work out how the humans operated.
Right.
And I would say sometimes, because sometimes I'm hyper good at spotting things. Some things, like people go, oh my God, you're so intuitive. And other times I'm completely and utterly unable to see the obvious. It just depends on the thing. Like somebody will go, oh, that person wasn't that nice to you. And I'll be like, weren't they?
Right.
But yeah, so it's really interesting. Whereas, some things I'm great at and other things I'm not as well. I was going to politely say I'm not as skilled at. Just don't have a Scooby-Doo, thanks. Probably at 52, am I ever going to have a Scooby-Doo? Luckily, I have a great team around me who can spot things for me.
They can have the Scoobies for you. Can I ask what
definitely.
treatment you're getting for ADHD? Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, so I am just about to go on the meds, which is exciting. No idea what type, because there's 8 different types. They've got an 80% success rate. Why do I know this? Well, I'm the kind of nerd that goes to lectures on things like this, which is really good. So I've waited ages. It was quite a long road. Well, obviously waited on the NHS list for 3 years, then found a not-for-profit that I qualified for that did the ADHD for only £600, which I know is a lot of money. But when you look at what other people charge, that's not. And now I'm going into titration, which is starting the meds, and we'll do that for 6 months. And then my medication will be handed back to the NHS. So it's kind of like a financial shock for me. But I'm hoping that will create, shut down the multiple programs running in my brain. But some of them, yeah. But outside of that, I've got incredibly good day-to-day routines that really support me in achieving, all the stuff we do, because I tend to do a lot of stuff.
You have to have a lot of structure, don't you, to be able to operate?
I run it, I have, luckily for me, I don't know whether it's slightly more ADHDs. I have like a really strict routine in the day that I love. And it's essentially probably the same routine a 3-year-old toddler would have.
Are there snacks within that?
There's snacks. And occasionally, I hate to admit, industry, an afternoon nap as well, if needed, which actually is just me rebooting my brain after a busy morning. So I'll go and just shut my eyes in a dark room for an hour, and that will be enough to kind of clear the decks for the afternoon. Though today I didn't have a nap, so let's see how I unravel on this chat.
I'm feeling a little bit bad now that I've cut into your nap time.
Can you imagine? But isn't it interesting? Because I get up really early, so I'm like, I always thought I was a night owl. Turns out that was just me being a young person in London. But yeah, I'm a naturally 5:30, 6 o'clock early bird. And I'm at my best between about 7 and 11 on the kind of tricky tasks when my brain is fresh. And I know I mentioned inputs earlier, but I do sort of view it like I've got a cup. Every input I get, like a conversation, a task, puts some substance in that cup, some liquid. And there comes a point where that cup just can't take anymore. And it starts pouring over the top. And obviously I start then trying to mop it up. And it's all quite chaotic. So now I've learned to do a timeout on myself when I get the signs that we've reached too much.
I think there are lessons here for people in the community who are not living with a neurodiversity, because you've got to know how you operate and you have to know how to top yourself up. And that is intrinsic to mental wellness. And the other thing that I'm hearing, that NABS this year in particular, we're really drilling down on management and helping managers to help their people to thrive. So that came out of our All Ears community consultation, that there's this gap that needs to be filled with management, where they're getting training on stuff like how to give an appraisal, but not the stuff that we really need, all of that mental wellness support. So what I'm also hearing is that if you are a manager and you have someone on your team saying, I'm going to have to just shut my eyes for half an hour, or just go for a walk, or just do something, whatever it is, to fill up my cup, and if that means I'm working till 8 o'clock, then I'm working in my rhythm, then your manager should say, okay, you need to do what you need to do that works for you, but also works for the business, and come to some kind of agreement where that person is not just completely ignoring their needs and suffering as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very blessed that obviously Brixton is my thing. So I've been given the opportunity to find my rhythm. obviously when I was in corporate meetings, I look back and God, some of the stuff I used to do if I was trapped in a meeting about 4 p.m. completely burnt out, you'd literally just, you could feel the energy building up. It was a very unpleasant place to be. So now, and again, I do obviously accept I have a massive position of privilege where I get to kind of decide my day because it's my risk. But definitely within my team, currently we've got quite, team we've got at the moment. I do encourage people to work in a rhythm. I would start with a position of trust on that person working in a rhythm. And actually, if they turn out not to actually be able to stick to that level of trust, that is something. But I've always hoped that you start out the same. And because I think I am, especially at this point in my existence, at the outer edges of as strong as this neurodiversity could be, it does make me really sensitive. But I'm also really conscious as well, because I am neurodiverse. I don't necessarily empathetically understand how to support a neurotypical person.
Interesting point.
And I think, because in terms of knowing, I know the manual for I've learnt my operating manual to get the best out of me. But obviously, I have no understanding of a neurotypical person's experience. And certainly, it's always a little mystery to me when occasionally I'll do a little faux pas. Like, I'm quite task focused, and they'll obviously, sorry, neurotypicals, they always want a bow around the task, don't they? You've got to kind of sort of put loads of biscuits around it, essentially. If that makes sense. If the task is something you don't want to eat, surround it by biscuits. So I've not been as good as that. And sometimes things that I never would consider a challenge, a problem, turn out to be something that a neurotypical would. And actually, just being really aware of my blind spots, and that is such a big learning curve for me all the time, because, hey, it's the first time I've got to this age with this. It's not as if I've done this age with this before. So in the business shape as it is, so it's definitely always trying to be within business parameters as open as I can to adapting and accommodating the many ways that people can show up.
That's really fascinating. It comes down to having a culture where you can communicate openly with your teams and understand how you work, so that whether you're on the side of biscuits or no biscuits, you can meet somewhere in the middle and get to where you need to be. Now, you hold a special place in my heart as far as industry people go, because when I started at NABS years ago, you were the first industry person that I spoke to. It was at a speed mentoring event. NABS used to do a lot of speed mentoring. We're thinking of bringing them back. You heard it here first. And out of everyone there, I mean, everyone was very nice, but you were the person who took time to actually sit with me, and you spoke to me, and you just gave me a life story. And you talked to me all about the challenges that you had growing up in the industry as a single parent, as someone who was socially mobile, and how, because you were a working class woman who was also a mum, you were getting passed over for promotion after promotion, even though you were outselling everybody else and doing an amazing job, which it really sticks with me. And I thought, that's so desperately unfair. And it's amazing that you're now using all of that experience to make sure that doesn't happen to other people. But even though that was quite some time ago, there are still people who are facing that kind of challenge and discrimination. So how, if at all, do you think we as an industry have moved on? What remains to be done? And if you were now starting, would you still be being passed over promotion and facing challenges because of your background?
Useful points. From a class perspective, Marketing Week's latest pay gap survey showed that in marketing roles, there's a 15.9% socially mobile pay gap. The same role. That's huge. Let's not forget the ethnicity pay gap is 8.4%. So definitely when you intersect on class and race, we are still seeing underservice to that particular talent pool by employers. So when we spoke was definitely a couple of years ago. I know that representation of women has improved in the industry. I know we're obviously doing some work around tackling with the wonderful work Metha does, also lots of other people, including ourselves, trying to change from a kind of race and class point of view, the makeup of the industry. Do I think there's work to be done? Completely. Yep. Why? Well, social mobility is at its worst in this country for 50 years, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies. It's never been harder to be somebody who has less advantage.
Right.
Yeah, that's all it is. We know that we need talent to come in, but when we look at how that talent tries to get into our industry, we do a talent survey every year, and 1 in 4 of our students can't afford to go to university at 18. This isn't a conversation about taking the maintenance loan, which I think's, or the tutorial loan. It's they have to be bringing money in to help support their families. Yeah. So it's this myth of the meritocracy is gone. A lot of places want degrees still, or a lot of places, there's still a bit of a certain type. That's what I'm going to put it. I think that class is still one of the great determinators in this industry of success. Obviously, clearly, we've got a shed load of work to still do around race. Yasmin Orego did a wonderful piece in Campaign a couple of weeks ago on whether, the people of colour across Adland felt as if Adland had done service to those pledges they made back in 2020. And I think, I may be I'm speaking for myself here, but the feeling I got when I read the piece was, there's been bits, but not enough. And I definitely feel in our Brixton Finishing School world, we've got over 50 amazing partners, always looking for more, Louise, always looking for more. But there's definitely been in the last 18 months a rollback in certain areas of the industry on affirmative action. So diversity, equity, inclusion programs, whether that's class, whether that's race, whether that's ability, whether that's neurodiversity, whether that's parents, or even age as well. Let's not forget, we may have started working in one bit of the industry, but any lack of equity is a concern of mine, especially now I'm over 50.
Of course.
Yeah. There you go. Sorry, I've completely lost my thread. But essentially, I think there's a lot of goodwill in our industry. We need to convert that goodwill, which we have through a lot of amazing partners, into sustained, future-proofed, measured action.
So what's one example? I mean, there's loads of actions that can be taken, but what's a practical takeaway that you could give people now to try and increase equality in their teams?
I think there's been a bit of a rollback into companies thinking they can run their own DE&I schemes without any DE&I experts. So, whether you speak to Creative Equals, whether you speak to Create Not Hate, whether you speak to WIC, whether you speak to Lydia Moa at the Black Pound Report, whether you speak to Brixton Finishing School, please stick with third-party experts who can work with you, because I think there's a bit of a, oh, no, we've let go of our D&I person because now D&I is everybody's issue. Well, it's always been everybody's issue. But the fact is, unless somebody's actually doing that job day to day, the things the shareholders want are going to take precedence. And I'm yet to see a VC, a venture capitalist, put D&I at the top of his bit of paper. By the way, it's most likely to be a him. There are 1 or 2 female VCs.
They're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
We would mention the inclusive leader training offered by NABS at this point as well, where we help managers to think about how they can create more inclusive atmospheres so people come to work feeling that they can be more themselves and that it's safe to discuss any mental wellness challenges or any other challenges they've got going on for them, so that you can have a broader range of people and experience within teams.
I think that's, I heartily endorse NABS's inclusive leadership training. There you go. I think Simone, my head of partnerships, has been on it. What else was I going to say on this one? Yeah, I just think lean in. I don't think and also accepting that all aspects of ESG are essentially the same side of a coin. You can't talk about sustainability without talking about the types of communities that are affected by sustainability. And the types of communities that are affected by sustainability are also the same communities that are least likely to get access to work. It's all part of the same thing. So I think that as a kind of industry, we shouldn't be going for whose flavour of the month to help. It should be a let's just sort this out. Oh, great example is your time to work with NABS.
Yes, indeed. So that's our campaign to stamp out sexual harassment in the advertising industry that we run with a number of partners, and that's been going since 2018.
The figures on that year on year, I mean, put it this way, I obviously was at the sharp end of this when I was a young person in industry, where literally it was 3 women on a floor of 60 men, and it was open season on those 3 women. And what I thought was wonderful was at the last all-in update I went to, the figures of people who'd experienced sexual harassment had dropped. I think it'd gone from 10% to 1% in about 2 years. Sorry if I'm misquoting the stats, but I remember actually thinking, that is amazing. That shows how behaviours can change. And I think that's it. Sometimes we can get a bit like, oh, what can I do? Actually, there's brilliant examples of stuff where a whole industry has changed within somebody's lifetime. And I'd love that to be the same on inclusion and representation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well. And, the campaign doesn't stop until you're at 0%. Exactly. So the work goes on.
Yeah.
And your work's going on as well. I mean, how has the Brixton Finishing School evolved since you set it up, working 7 days a week? And what's the current focus?
So it started as in my kitchen with 24 18 to 25-year-olds from central London, from multicultural and working class backgrounds. Now we're a national family of programmes, all of which are dedicated to creating work-ready talent through one of our accessible free pathways in. So we've gone from like London only to bigger London stuff to a free national school called the Academy. So whether you're in Fife or Huddersfield or St Ives, places with location opportunity poverty, you can still upskill online. You can come to virtual weeks and join the industry. My most big exciting thing is Adventure. And it's big exciting because it's flavour of the week this week. Adventure is our school's outreach programme. It was an idea that Yasmin Arroyo came up with in 2021 and we put into action. And we've done it with very little funding. Some wonderful funders lent in this year. That was Fandom, Newsworks and DCM. But more importantly, the Marketing Skills Trust have just given us the funding for a Head of Adventure, which is going to revolutionise our school's outreach. So bear in mind, with very little funding, we signed up 153 schools and visited 35,000 14 to 19-year-olds to tell them about careers in this industry. I'm excited to see what we can do with an actual person on.
Oh, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's a lot of communities where advertising isn't encouraged as a career, or just because there's no one else working in advertising as a role model, then it's not something they think of.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're from, say, communities that value really high education outcomes, then, if you're, say, from an African background, they'll go investment banker, surgeon, at the worst, you'll be an accountant. Yeah. So unless you have role models within that community showing that actually with being something in our industry is A, it's a profession, B, you're going to earn some decent money. Yeah. And it's probably going to suit you a bit more than, say, another profession, because you're more like this industry, in the way you think, then it's really, really tricky. I mean, even where I live, the estate I live on in Dalston, it's really hard. And I'm obviously doing this job and I'm living here. One of my neighbour's kids, he did really well at a Screen Academy, like a specialist sixth form. But when he was 18, he thought the route to get into production was to do an accountancy apprenticeship. And I said, why have you done that? That's not production. He went, but production houses have accountants. I said, well, do you want to be an accountant? And he was like, no, I don't. I don't want to be an accountant at all. But I couldn't think of another way of getting into a production house. And you just realise how confusing and opaque and just hard to understand to a normal person outside our industry, the kind of way the ecosystem works. So, yeah, for me, it's like we are really bad on awareness. So that's why Adventure is so important. and we really need to close oh my God, I can't remember the word now. It's not accessibility. It's the one in the middle where you believe you can do something. Attainability
Attainability
gap.
gap.
That's it. There you go, little menopausal pause on the brain there. Yeah, so you look at our offices, most of our offices from the outside look like hotels. Nobody really knows. And when you look at like a trendy creative office, like, oh my God, it's actually it's a bit too much sometimes. Why would they want me? I am just average human. But actually, all those offices are just made up of just other lovely little humans. But we just need to break down those walls.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. How does the advertising and marketing community lift you up?
Well, I would not be sat here today chatting to you, lovely Louise, if people hadn't lifted me up. So bear in mind, I started this in my kitchen. There's no way I would have survived without all the wonderful supporters and mentors and advocates that have helped us over the years and our wonderful partners. I think one of my special talents, apart from being quite unusual, is is attracting people who want to help, want to support me, and us being a bit of a crew. So like a mafia, but a mafia that does
A
good
nice
rather than
mafia.
scary things. A really nice mafia. And I definitely wouldn't have I wouldn't have been able to keep going if I hadn't had people who were willing to deal, to be there and deal with some of my lower points when I was really burnt out. I mean, I remember when I was really ADHD, a lovely one of my colleagues actually just said, why don't I just come and sit next to you today as an accountability
That's
partner? And I
amazing.
was like, I know. So she just came to see me. We sat, and as soon as I had somebody sat next to me, I could start on the task. This is a classic ADHD thing where we can find, if we don't think there's a lot of dopamine in a task, we'll wait a bit to do it until it becomes really anxious making. And then we just need somebody to sit near us, which actually in old offices where you had colleagues, that kind of happened naturally, didn't it? Virtually it happens a bit less. So I've got amazing trustees and an amazing board. So if anything, I'm the product of a village of industry people. Who've all sponsored Brixton, and it just makes it really joyful and hopeful. Though obviously, like everybody, we still have the odd dark day, but nothing a WhatsApp text with maybe a panda falling off something doesn't
A
cure.
comedy animal is always going to help.
Please send me comedy animal memes. I don't know what I'm starting there.
Your inbox is going to be full. It's not dissimilar to what I remember you telling me about when we had that first chat, because you were a single parent and you were in this industry working whatever hours you were having to work, because it was how it was then and probably is for a lot of people now. And you said you just relied on the friends that you had and other mums, neighbours on the estate, and they would just look after your kid for you when needs be. And it was that sense of being able to succeed because you had this collective around you.
I would say, I mean, this is not a solo effort in any way. And sometimes I find it quite orcs when people list my accolades, because none of that's possible without the collective around you. It's actually like a group. I work much better within a kind of collegiate structure where I've got lots of people around me that are kind of going in the same direction. I'm like a minnow in a shoal, basically, just going through the little ocean, trying to find my destination.
So that means that comedy memes about minnows will be especially appreciated.
Yeah. Or Labradors. I hate to say it, just Labradors.
You're going to get the whole zoo coming to you. We have reached the last question, which it's just gone so quickly, which is not surprising in a way because you are so rapid fire, but also quite sad because I've really enjoyed talking to you. So what's the best lesson that you've learned about how to support yourself?
Not to be perfect. I used to have ridiculously high standards of myself, and I used to have a lot of shame, and I was convinced I was a failure when I didn't reach one of these ridiculously high standards. That makes sense. I think this is quite true for a lot of neurodiverse people. What I am now is a work in progress who can say sorry when they've done something, when they haven't done something right. Not only say sorry, but make up for it. No, act in a different way and take the lesson. And there's no shame in making mistakes. That's part of actually becoming a much better leader. If I hadn't made all the mistakes I've made, I wouldn't have learned all the lessons I've made. And I'm sure, the universe has got a shed load more lessons to give me. There is no doubt about that. But, one would hope that every iteration of a mistake, every time it's a little improvement. Or if I don't listen to the lesson, I'll get the lesson again, but more painfully, normally. And that will normally be enough to nudge me onto, the right path.
That is really inspiring. Even when you have reached the pinnacle of your career, or you're at the top, there are still mistakes to be made. There's still self-awareness to be worked on. And there are still minnows to compare yourself to. You are so much more than a minnow, Ally. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Where can people find out more about the Brixton Finishing School and all of the great work that you're doing?
Well, obviously we're on LinkedIn. If you search Brixton Finishing School or you link in with me, that would be great. We also have a wonderful website which details how you could partner with us, which is www.brixtonfinishingschool.org. But just drop me a DM and I'll link you up with one of the teams. We'd love to get more people on board. And Louise, thanks so much for your time today.
You are so welcome, and we'll pop those links in the show notes as well, so that people can get to you. You've been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Whether you go off and have a walk, do some more work, or have a nap afterwards, I wish you a beautiful afternoon.
I may have a little sit outside with a cup of tea. There you go.